Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything, from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal.
See anything unusual?
No, looks like a normal web page to me, except for that little icon at the bottom of the screen?
Click on it and then press Control-Shift.
My God.
So, what do you make of all this?
Simple. It's a programming glitch. It's just a futz keystroke that sent you to the wrong internet address, that's all.
Last night it sent me to Amtrak Central Mainframe and then the Mayo Clinic, neither of them on the same subnet. Angela, I've accessed a system I shouldn't have. If someone gets a hold of that disk, they'd have an awful lot of power.
So why don't you just crawl in there, find the program error, and delete it?
Not quite ready to do that yet.
So, if you can tell me what movie that's from, I would be very impressed. So go ahead and just send us, send us a message on let's see, maybe you can just post it on YouTube, or if you want to send us an email, that would be great as well. But do you know what that was from?
I recognized it immediately.
Okay.
And it hurts a little bit.
I know. I don't think our younger audience would recognize it. But maybe, who knows? We'll see. I just thought I'd do that for fun. But anyway, so today we are going to talk about the recent Crowdstrike event. What happened, why it happened, what can be done in the future to prevent issues like this one, and what this does to the user experience of Crowdstrike. So, how are you?
I am good. The instant this happened last week, I immediately thought, okay, this is definitely a podcast topic because it is going to affect probably everything. I know it's kind of a like nuts and bolts kind of inside baseball kind of thing. Like a lot of people who aren't in tech or aren't working within computing or IT are going to say, it's kind of boring. But this is going to have some ripples and shockwaves.
Absolutely. I think that pretty much everyone is aware of it, obviously, because it was like one of the biggest IT failures in history, because it affected pretty much everyone's life and their travel plans, their banking, everything from hotels to hospitals. But I think it's interesting to talk about actually what happened and why it happened, because it shows how we're making this transition right now from everything being done by professionals to trying to automate certain components. And that's kind of where this failure unfolded. First, let's talk about what Crowdstrike is for everybody. Okay, so Crowdstrike is a cybersecurity company based in Austin, Texas, and they specialize in protecting companies from cyber attacks. And they are very widely used throughout many industries. I mean, pretty much everyone I know uses Crowdstrike at their company. So it's a very big company that's kind of like weaved into the architecture of technology. But on July 19th, 2024, just in case someone's listening to this a year from now, as a result of a faulty update that Crowdstrike sent for their Falcon sensor configuration for Windows, which was intended to enhance security by targeting newly observed malicious activity, there was an inadvertent logic error. So anyone who's familiar with coding knows that a logic error will create a failure. That led to a widespread system crash and blue screens of death. So you hear BSOD all the time. That's the blue screen of death on a Windows machine where it just goes blue and then you have to reboot it all. And in effect, millions and millions of machines. The IT failure shut down several different companies in different industries, including airlines like Delta and American, package delivery services like FedEx, and several hospitals had to reschedule surgeries. Demetrius, you had dug this up, but the direct cost was more than $5 billion lost in productivity during that time period.
Yeah, it's probably going to stretch much more. When you get into the lost productivity, you have people who missed, meetings or appointments or just getting to work. There is a lot at stake here, and it's gonna hurt Crowdstrike quite a bit.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking too, because we imagine that in this day and age, you and I know this is not 100% true, but in this day and age, there are redundancies that are set up for almost everything. But we're actually still kind of in this beginning phase of like digitizing the entire world, connecting it, creating, secure layers to protect certain institutions who want to be digital but don't want to be on the internet, that kind of stuff. I think it's an evolving thing, but you think 2024, we're like, wow, like, it's past the year 2000. We got this dialed in, and not really, not really.
Yeah.
So why did this happen, D? So
So
tell me what happened.
yeah, I did some digging around, and it seems like the reporting is continuing to kind of evolve. So as more information comes out, so maybe this information that I have will turn out to be a little off, but the gist of it is probably going to be the same. So ultimately, the CrowdStrike update was sent out with an important file that was accidentally left blank. So it was just null values within the file. And since it installs at the OS kernel level, it caused the Windows machines to keep trying to load that file, and it failed. And then it led to a buffer overrun, and then you end up in a boot loop, and then you blue screen. And anybody who's ever had that kind of situation, you know that the only way to do it to fix that is to boot into safe mode and roll back the update or uninstall the file or the program, which you first have to identify what the problem is. Then you can go through those processes, but you have to do it on each affected machine one by one, and each one can take a decent amount of time. It can't be something that you can send out like an over-the-air update that fixes it. So it was a nightmare. And some of these companies like American Airlines and Delta, because of the number of machines that are affected and the amount of work that it takes to fix it, they're still fixing machines, and it's almost a week later.
Yeah. So let me tell you what I did. I actually reached out to a friend of ours that's an IT specialist, and then I also reached out to a QA specialist. The IT specialist was incredibly stressed. Him and I are friends, and we were supposed to get together. We ended up getting together, but it was kind of cut close because our trip that we were going to do, because he was repairing machines and he was trying to get this all squared away before we took off, because this happened 2 days before a trip that we were going on. And he said it just, he said it was a hot mess. And it basically got the whole team to stop everything that they're doing. So you talk about, that $5 billion in cost, right? Stop all the projects that they're working on. And the only thing that they were working on was solving this problem internally so that everyone can get back to running again. And so it was
get
an
on
issue.
the phone with individual users and like walk them through the process. Wow,
he did, yeah, because of the remote working thing, right? So if everyone was still in the office again, then they can go and basically, I guess, based on what he was telling me, go and access all of their machines, test them, make sure there's no problems, all that kind of stuff. But because everybody works remotely around the country now, it was more like hopping on calls, like phone calls, because the machines they were using didn't work anymore, and then helping them go through the process of, booting into safe mode and doing what they need to do in order to clear everything up. So it became an issue. It kind of still is, but they're working it out, and they're pretty much through it. But it's one of those things where it like shocks you, because you didn't realize that one failure can basically, like, I don't know, cripple your whole company.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's brutal.
The other thing I did was I talked to a QA person. And so why don't you tell us what the real bigger story here is of what happened, and then I'll tell you what he said.
Yeah, so I mean, a bad update going out, it happens, or it has historically happened. It's rare for it to like blue screen a machine, partially because most machines don't have access to like the kernel level. This is because it's such an important piece of cybersecurity that it was. But this update was able to go out because CrowdStrike had switched to an automated QA tool for regression testing. And that automated tool had a bug in it that got missed, like as bugs often do. It got missed multiple times with other updates that went out that didn't have this flaw in it. And that bug both allowed this failure to go undetected, but also pushed it out automatically. So it was because humans were out of the loop, and automation, which every time you hear automation, ultimately it's AI. This was a failure in an AI QA tool that took down like whole industries.
Yeah. So I talked to a friend that works in QA, and he was saying this is a perfect example of why you need redundancies with automation systems. So the thing is that do we want to get to the point where we can automate a lot of stuff? Absolutely, right? If you can automate a lot of the basic things like pushing updates, stuff like that, then you can focus your energy on much bigger campaigns that need to be taken care of internally, right? So this is something that, ever since I've been in, the tech industry, we've worked on as different ways to automate certain processes, right? with QA in particular, I mean, you've got to think about what that job is. It's quality assurance. This is the people who are checking to make sure that everything is good to go before it goes to production. In this particular case, they left the QA person out of it or team out of it, and the system would just automatically do its thing. Now, maybe it's been automatically doing its thing for years and it was fine. I don't know. But this is one of those situations where every company now will go, okay, wait a minute. What is the stuff that we're automating and we're pushing out that could potentially cause risk? And let's get someone involved in that. Let's put a layer in there to stop this from happening. I think that is key. I mean, we over-index sometimes, right? So we get to the point where we're like, okay, we're going to lay all these people off, and then we're going to automate everything, and then we're going to have fewer people and reduce our costs and increase our share price. And then things catch us, and then we go, oh, wait a minute, maybe we need to not go so far. And this feels like
Yeah.
one of those moments where everyone's going to check themselves to
Yeah.
make sure that their stuff doesn't go too far.
It's crazy to me because all it would have taken, most bugs are things that people encounter like in some kind of like you do something like edge casey or like off the beaten path a little bit and you run into a bug and then you have to find it and fix it and things like that. There aren't a lot of things that would just instantly crash every single affected machine, right? It's
Yeah.
usually like, all right, well, you run into a bug, X percentage, like 5% of users were affected by the bug because they usually just don't encounter it. Uh, for it to shut down an entire system, an entire platform, basically every single Windows user that was out there, all it would have taken to avoid this was to have one employee in QA install each machine, the update on each platform, Mac, Linux, Windows, make sure they boot and it doesn't run into a problem. And this would have been completely avoided. This is like a couple hours of work, if that.
Yeah, and it's all done on virtual machines now, so it can be done quite quickly. Like, yeah, I mean, it's easy for us to quarterback it and say you should have done this, right? Because at the same time, like I said, our march toward automation is still moving forward. Like we do want to have AI, we do want to automate, we do want to like streamline systems. It's just that when it's catastrophic like this, you're like, oh God, right? Like you said, it's not
Yeah.
5%, it's everybody. That's where
Well,
you kind of go, oh, there's a failure there. And I can see this from a government perspective stepping in too, right? So I read this very interesting study when I was in college about a guy who was a map specialist and getting his PhD in like geography. And
mhm.
one of the things that he did for his PhD dissertation was he mapped out all of the power lines and the power systems of the entire country and where they go and what they do and how they connect and all this kind of stuff. Well, apparently no one has ever done this like at like
Wow.
scale and made it made it automated in the sense that he put it into a computer program and then you can click on, let's say, California and then a particular area, and then it shows everything that goes out in that area if that particular power goes down. It was really
Hmm.
interesting, right? Guess who contacted him immediately and didn't allow him to actually take this uh, basically publish his dissertation? The U.S. government,
Yeah.
the Department of Energy,
The
right? So
first place where my mind went is that you can
yeah,
identify critical vulnerabilities in the system in order to do maximum damage, and that's
absolutely.
useful to the Department of Energy to protect that, but it's also very useful to bad actors.
Absolutely, right? And so I always think back at that and I realize that this is one of those examples where the government steps in and goes, okay, wait a minute. If something as simple as that caused these types of failures across our air traffic system and our hospitals and everything, what else is out there? And we need to start doing basically like analyses and tests to determine where our failure points are. So, I mean, there's going to be some good things that come out of this, like in the sense of maybe we'll look at everything and say, okay, we need to fix areas where there's going to be catastrophic problems if things fail, right? This might be
Hmm.
that one thing that's how humans work, right? You make a mistake and you learn from it. So I do believe that this is going to be bigger than just like, oops, sorry, you made a mistake. I think the US government will probably contact them and be like, okay, we need to talk about this.
Yeah, yeah, I
You
agree
know,
with that. This
um,
is the kind of thing where like an infrastructure level cloud or just on-prem kind of system fails and it takes down billions of dollars in productivity, then
absolutely.
there needs to be safeguards in place for sure.
So do you think that someone's going to be held accountable for this, like fired for this, like the CEO or something?
Well, I think it might be more than that. I think there is a danger. I'm not going to say it's a definite, but there's a danger of CrowdStrike just not recovering and going away. Like CrowdStrike might not exist a year from now. And there's a few reasons for that. I'll dig into that. So the first indicator, stock is already down $130 a share. It plummeted.
Oh,
If you had a short sell position on CrowdStrike going into like last Wednesday, then you made a good amount of money.
so you're
That
like, why
is
would I though?
just part of it. Yeah. I mean, going into last week, you would look at this like, okay, this is almost a too big to fail kind of company. Well, it's just a blue chipper basically. It's on business entities, enterprise, everything all across the board. It feels like a safe bet. Where I think they're really going to get hurt though is fines, government fines for their failures, and lawsuits that stretch into potentially multi-billions, who knows, maybe trillions of dollars. Not just from, I mean, they could be found that they were negligent in this process, which maybe they were. That's not really for me to decide. I'm sure there are people who are in QA and IT who are much better uh, able to look at that. But there are going to be a lot of people looking at like, all right, well, I lost X amount of money. How am I going to make up for that? That's just for the corporations themselves. There are individual users who had like their again surgeries were rescheduled or flights were canceled. People who were stranded, who knows where, on their way home from a trip or on their way out from a trip. They might have missed out on opportunities. That could be class action lawsuits in addition to that. So
Yeah.
this could be the point where they just need to go through bankruptcy and potentially shut down. That's potential. We don't know. It could be restructuring and they'd be okay, or they could be a target acquisition for the IP to roll into somebody else's tech stack. But the couple funny things on top of this, because nothing can apparently go right for CrowdStrike these couple weeks. They sent out a bunch of Uber Eats gift cards as I'm sorry, $10 each to a bunch of their staff and affected companies. But which in itself is kind of like really a $10 gift card. Obviously doesn't make up for anything.
Was this before or after they realized how big this was?
I don't know, but it was quickly derided by a lot of people because it just seems ridiculous. But the ridiculousness reached a new level because Uber saw the large numbers going out and thought it was some kind of fraud or something, and they blocked it.
Oh,
A bunch of people got a bunch of Uber Eats gift cards that then didn't work. Why don't you let me know what you think about that stuff, and I'll add one other detail that I kind of debated even bringing up.
So that's weird. Who was like, you know what we'll do? We'll send out some gift cards. Matter of fact, we'll send out a gift card that's so small you can only buy food for you can't even buy food for yourself. You need
It's
at least
like
$12 to
like
buy
an
a sandwich.
appetizer. You
It's
can
like an
buy
appetizer.
you can buy some egg rolls.
Yeah. Like it's a very strange thing. Like I can imagine them sending out like, we're sorry, if they thought like maybe like a tiny number of companies were affected. That's why I asked when this was sent out, because if it was sent out, oh, look, 5 companies had a problem, send out some gift cards or something. But then, when you have like thousands of companies affected and all that, it's like, what's going on? I don't get it. So it sounded to me like a little bit of triage going on there. But usually what happens in these situations is people will sue them, and then basically they'll have to like fire their CEO or something like that, just to kind of show that they are committed to change internally and that kind of stuff in order to like mitigate a lot of these lawsuits and stuff. So I don't know. This could be a long battle.
Yeah, this could be a real challenge for them. They're so bringing up somebody getting fired. Now, I want to preface this by saying that we have no idea what happened internally and who was responsible for what. But there is some precedence here. The CEO of CrowdStrike, George Kurtz. So CEOs are not usually or very rarely involved in day to day, and almost certainly wasn't involved in this routine operation to go out. But he probably did approve like the automated moving to an automated process and those kinds of things. This is not the first time something like this has happened for him. So in October 2009, I should say has happened under his watch. In October 2009, he was working at McAfee, and he was the chief technical officer. 6 months after becoming the CTO, McAfee pushed out an update that caused a critical error for Windows XP users that caused a blue screen and boot loop because the update deleted a critical file. So, critical
Bad
system
luck, man.
files, I should say. So between those two, it's been noted that these two updates from security companies, ironically enough, has done more damage and lost productivity and cost than any malware in history. So, not to say that he's directly responsible, but
yeah, I highly doubt he's directly responsible. But like, I would say that that's some seriously bad luck, dude. Like, if that's how it turned out, like I'm sure he's very well compensated, but like, you go home and you're like, oh my god, both companies I've been at have had huge IT failures. And there is that whole thing of the buck stops here and he should have known and blah, blah, blah. But like, you're right, though. I mean, they're usually not interacting with day to day at that level.
no.
And so someone will be responsible. Someone will, probably get their hand slapped for having too much automation or, not, following up on what was going on early enough and that kind of stuff, which is kind of unfair because like I was saying before, like we do want automation. We do want to like push things in that direction. It's just, we don't want them to go so far that they cause like massive failures across the entire country. Right. So
yeah, it's also could be the case that we don't know, where this is all speculation. I preface this by saying it's speculation. It is entirely possible that this all happened. I'm sure that the update itself was created because it's a routine update, right? It happens for every like malware, cybersecurity service out there. They identify new threats. They put that into an update so their systems are prepared for those threats, and then it gets pushed out. So that just happens on a regular schedule. That certainly happened without his direct input, almost certainly.
yeah.
But what might have happened under his that he approved or potentially even pushed for was moving to an automated only QA process. So that, if he did, it could be something that regulators or affected parties and litigators or stockholders can look at and say, hey, what's your level of responsibility for this?
Yeah. Well, usually when these massive things happen, they usually end up having to step down. Just partly because of perception, right? Is that you want to say like, oh, we brought in a new CEO, the other one stepped down or is on the board, but like, we have someone else handling operations at this point. It just kind of shows that you're willing to take accountability for it. I want to ask you from a UX perspective, like you're a customer you're a potential customer and you're looking at CrowdStrike as an option for your platform. How do you view it now?
Well, I mean, the first thing I look at is what are the competitors in the space?
Yeah,
like,
right.
What are the other options, and like what are their track record? Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I feel like it's a use case here where you're like, okay, this particular company had this major failure. Even if they're fixing it, the human condition is kind of like, I got to look for other options. Like, I don't even want to go back to my boss and say, oh, we're going to use CrowdStrike, right? Because it's in the news and
it's tainted now. It's like saying like, oh, we're working with Enron.
Yeah. Well, I mean, can they get past it? I mean, I think Boeing will get past their problems. I think that, some of these other companies have. It's possible. Or like you said, it might be a great opportunity for someone to come in and buy CrowdStrike and then just, blend their technology with someone else's technology and then grow.
Yeah. I mean, would it surprise you at all if Microsoft or Salesforce or Amazon swooped in and bought them on the cheap and then just integrated their IP?
Yeah, no, not at all. I think they would integrate it and get it to work, and people would, within 6 months, completely forget that the cybersecurity option that you're getting from Microsoft was originally CrowdStrike. Like, it'd be gone.
They would rebrand it.
That's the thing. You'd be gone. You would never say to yourself, "Well, that used to be the CrowdStrike software." Like, it just be out of your brain, right?
Yeah, it's like AT&T used to be singular, and before it was singular, it was AT&T. So,
I thought it was like
These are
Parrot
things we forget.
Wireless or something as well.
I don't know. I think when AT&T got split up originally, then it was it's split up into a bunch of different names like Parrot and Singular. But then when they bought them again, so it all kind of it all came full circle. But
Exactly.
it
Well,
wouldn't surprise me at all. It wouldn't. Whatever happens would not surprise me at all at this point.
what is the real danger here? Like taking
So
forget CrowdStrike, but taking the 30,000 foot view of what happened.
So I think that this is the danger of AI that people who work within the industry have really been pointing out. It's not that you're going to have an Ultron or a Skynet or something like that. Like I've said this before, an AI that becomes self-aware has no motivation to try to take over the world. It does nothing for them. They don't care, right? They don't care what happens to humans. They don't have motivation at all. They're just machines. They don't have neurons that are or impulses that are telling them to do things. They are just operating. So the real issue is failures. There are poorly constructed or poorly trained models that are instituting bias or incorrect assumptions or bad information. It's kind of like when you ask ChatGPT about something, or Gemini or any others, and they don't know the answer, but they give you the best answer they have, and they don't tell you their level of knowledge about it. They just kind of seem to make things up. Those are things that, like, it's operating poorly, crashing, breaking things unintentionally, and just poorly constructed AI is the kind of thing that could bring down the internet, or bring down a power grid, or stop all the traffic lights in a city. These are probably the real issues, and people need to be very judicious about rolling things out, especially for critical infrastructure systems, to make sure you don't have, a buffer overrun on a nuclear plant.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, I've always felt that way, and I think that for critical things like you're talking about, like power plants and stuff like that, there has been over the last decade or so, I've noticed that there's been more and more security, more and more redundancies. Things move slower. Things are on prem. Like we're getting to that point. We're getting a little smarter about it. This particular one really showed, though, that when you use commercial stuff, that is run by a company and controlled by them, and you don't have, I don't know, you don't really have an understanding of how updates are pushed and all that kind of stuff. You're just assuming that it's going to be okay because the company's like taking care of it and you bought their services. That things could happen, right? And
Yeah.
so I look at the situation and I kind of predict that there's going to be a lot more, what do they call that, auditing. So
Yes.
internal auditing at the companies, auditing over at the U.S. government, auditing as individual IT people, just saying like, okay, we need to do a yearly audit and figure out what goes where, how, what's touching what AI systems are we using, how are they functioning, what do the log files show, and we need to figure out how everything functions. And we need to stay on top of it, and we need to make sure that management's aware of it and leadership and everything, because at this point, if you look at, you talk to most CEOs, they'll basically tell you that they're automating like crazy. Like they have,
Mm-hmm.
what is it? Customer service automation. You have, things like back end system scraping, so you can get information about your customers. There's a lot of automation going on, right? But automation that pushes updates is a risky one. It's interesting. I mean, it happens. We all do it, and that's what I'm saying. I don't want to be like I'm beaten down on them, because I honestly think that this was just a mistake and it happened, and now the world's aware of it. Um, but I do think that we are now at a point where we have to take a pause a little bit and stop rushing to automate everything and figure out what needs to be done and what should be done.
Yeah, I think everybody is in a rush to. I mean, ultimately, it's the way that AI should be used, ideally, is to expand capabilities. And I think where it's primarily being used right now is to save money.
Yeah.
And if you're in a rush to save money, you're going to end up costing yourself. It's a very penny wise, pound foolish, and CrowdStrike might be kind of the example of that from a financial standpoint going forward. But it's critical right now that every AI system is overseen and managed by a human.
Mm-hmm.
This reason why human in the loop AI is considered the way to go right now. There's a reason why the model right now is humans using AI tools, not fully automated, completely on their own AI systems acting on their own. I think we might eventually get there for some things, but this is not the time.
Yeah, I agree. One last thing before we head out. Does anyone use crypto anymore? I'm just curious.
The
Like, I haven't heard anything about this in so long that like I'm like, is crypto
yeah,
still around?
people. I've looked at it recently, and it keeps going up. So I think that there are people out there who are still involved in it, but like as far as like, is this going to be a technology that changes the world? No, I don't think so.
Well, it's interesting because the reason why I bring that up is because we're talking about AI and all this kind of stuff, and I realized that I haven't heard anyone that's around me talk about crypto or anything related to crypto in at least a year. And to me, that's always a sign.
I have heard some things. I think there are some things going on that are interesting. It's less crypto, I should say, than just blockchain based technologies being used for certain things that I think are
Yeah.
interesting. But it's kind of how it should have always been, where blockchain is a back end technology that adds a security layer to cloud based operations that are distributed, as opposed to a consumer facing investment product. That's just not going to, I mean, investment products in general don't have wide appeal, and they don't tend to necessarily change the world. But yeah, there's not really a reason for crypto to exist.
But
Well, do you have any predictions about what's going to happen as far as the way that AI is treated, for especially for these infrastructure level things as a result of this?
I think that it's kind of what I said earlier. I think this is the pause moment. I think this is the moment where everyone goes, "Oh, we can't run fast and break things." Meta. We have to slow down and we have to make sure. No, real. I mean, that's their
It's true.
motto, right? Is run fast and break things or whatever it is. And it's like, no. When it comes to AI, I think we need to slow down. We need to make everything use case driven. We need to know what's happening and when. If the
Mm-hmm.
system is like making shit up, then you have a problem, right? Like let's take a pause here. There's no rush. We're all fine. We love our technology. It works great. And then
Yeah,
be very specific about what goes out and what doesn't by the systems.
yeah. I would love if that happened. I think that might have to be imposed upon people because they're so you know how it works. Once it kind of catches on in people's heads, they're just like, "Oh, we're in a hurry, we're in a rush." And the reality is, you never really need to be in a rush. It's almost never the first to market that is successful long term. It's almost always somebody who comes along second or third, right? If you're comparing um, Friendster to MySpace to Facebook to Instagram, right, to TikTok. So things always progress. You don't need to be the first one out. Uh, I wouldn't be surprised if this stimulates some new government regulation, either through existing regulatory bodies like the FCC, or potentially a new regulatory body that's focused specifically on cyber infrastructure and critical companies that are serving them, especially as it relates to AI. And just making sure that like there are requirements for this to be done for QA to be done this way, that updates need to be done through this process. I think for sure we're going to hear some announcements from CrowdStrike, Cloudflare, other related companies saying like, all right, here are anybody who is installing something that affects system files should be very, very transparent about their process to make sure it's not going to break your system. And I think we'll see that at a minimum. The other thing is, I wouldn't be surprised if Windows and potentially other operating system manufacturers start developing some internal testing for automated testing for updates that go out, so that before it even gets installed locally, some automated AI system takes another look at it just to be sure, to make sure that there's not any damaged files in there that are about to be installed in order to help mitigate this kind of thing.
Sounds like a new startup idea.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
lot of times when these things happen, this is where companies are born.
it's
People
true.
looking at it saying there's a layer missing and we need to build on it.
Yeah, and if
And
there
so it's
was a way
possible.
for them to remotely just push like instructions through like Maybe it's time for Microsoft to update safe mode so that this kind of thing can just be modified all in a batch instead of individually one by one. That would mitigate the effect a lot too.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, well, we'll see how this unfolds, and maybe we can come back and talk about it as just one of our little highlights of what's in the news, this week or next week. I'm sure we'll hear more in the next coming months, but it'll be interesting for sure. But thanks everyone so much for taking the time to listen to us. Really appreciate it. We post all of our updates as well as video versions of the podcast on YouTube at the X Podcast. So please go to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. Also, if you like this podcast and found it interesting or informative, helps us a great deal if you subscribe or leave a review on whatever platform you use. Thank you all, and we'll see you all next week.